Our first speaker will be Giudicelli, who's a member of MPA and is involved in the anti-racist and anti-fascist movement in France. Thank you.
Hello everybody, sorry, I will not speak in English, so Jade will translate me. Depuis 2 semaines en France, tous les commentateurs politiques s'attachent à regarder qui sera l'opposition au gouvernement de Macron. D'un côté, Jean-Luc Mélenchon avec la France Insoumise, qui a fait 7 millions de voix au premier tour et a aujourd'hui 17 députés à l'Assemblée nationale, ou de l'autre, Marine Le Pen et le Front National, qui a réussi à arriver au second tour, faire 10 500 000 voix et a actuellement 8 députés.
Over the past few weeks, pundits and commentators in France are debating over who will be the main opposition to Emmanuel Macron over the next few years. Will it be Jean-Luc Mélenchon and the France Insoumise, who is on the left and who managed to get 7 million votes in the presidential elections and has a group of 17 MPs, or will it be Marine Le Pen, who obviously is on the far right from Front National and who managed to reach the second round of the presidential election with 10.5 million votes and has 2 MPs currently. 8 MPs, sorry.
Si cette question se pose, c'est parce que tout le monde est d'accord pour dire que Macron est certainement le président le plus mal élu de la Ve République, avec simplement 15% des inscrits qui ont voté pour lui, et que, du coup, l'initiative, qu'elle soit de gauche ou à l'extrême droite qui sera prise, sera sans doute déterminante dans les mois qui viennent.
This is because everybody agrees that Macron is the most badly elected president of the history of the Fifth Republic, in the sense that if you take into account abstention, etc., only 15% of people who are on electoral lists have actually voted for him.
Ce que je voudrais argumenter ici, c'est le fait qu'on ne pourra pas, nous, la gauche radicale, évoluer parallèlement au Front National, parce que si en France il y a un rejet massif des politiques libérales et des partis qui l'ont mis en œuvre, le Parti socialiste et les Républicains, ce n'est pas simplement sur les questions d'austérité qu'aujourd'hui le Front National se construit.
If I am saying this, it's because we on the radical left cannot simply advance in parallel to the National Front, because if it is true that today there is massive rejection and massive opposition to the neoliberal policies that were implemented by the two mainstream parties, however, the vote and the popularity and the strength of the Front National does not only come from an anti-austerity mood.
Et s'il y a un an en France, on a montré qu'on pouvait être les champions de la lutte contre l'austérité, avec des dizaines, des centaines de milliers de personnes qui ont fait grève, des blocages, etc. Cela n'a jamais fait reculer le Front National dans les sondages.
And if indeed in France we have shown over the past year that we can have very serious and massive struggles with hundreds of thousands of demonstrators and of strikers against neoliberal policies. However, this struggle has not made has not put the Front National on the back foot.
Et malheureusement, on ne peut pas dire aujourd'hui qu'en France, on soit les champions de la lutte antifasciste, puisqu'alors qu'en 2002, 2 millions de personnes avaient manifesté contre le passage de Jean-Marie Le Pen au second tour, cette année, seulement quelques milliers, principalement des lycéens, ont occupé la rue contre les résultats du premier tour des élections présidentielles.
And we definitely cannot say that we are champions of anti-fascist struggle in France, because while in 2002 over 2 million people demonstrated against Jean-Marie Le Pen when he reached the second round of the presidential election, this year only a few thousands demonstrated against Marine Le Pen, and it was mainly high school students.
Et dans les quelques minutes que j'ai, je voudrais insister sur un point des débats politiques qui ont lieu en France aujourd'hui, c'est la façon dont on analyse ce parti, qui du coup a des conséquences sur la façon dont on peut le combattre.
And in the few minutes that I have, I really want to insist on an important aspect of the debate, of the political debate today in France, which is how do we analyze the Front National Party?
À partir de la fin de la Seconde Guerre mondiale, tous les antifascistes s'accordaient sur l'idée qu'il fallait absolument laisser aucun espace politique à l'extrême droite et à tous les groupes qui étaient identifiés comme fascistes, y compris le Front National.
So after World War II, there was a general agreement on the political field in France that no space whatsoever should be left to the fascists or those who identify with the fascists. And this included, of course, the nascent Front National.
Et si le Front National, depuis sa création en 1972, a toujours tenté de se dédiaboliser, le changement important a eu lieu quand Marine Le Pen a pris la place de son père à la direction de ce parti en 2011.
So Front National, ever since its creation in 1972, has always tried to detoxify its image. But the really important change came in 2010 when Marine Le Pen took over the presidency of the Front National. She took it over from her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen. That was in 2010.
Ok. Elle a mis en œuvre une stratégie qui consistait à chasser les plus fascistes de son parti et à se concentrer sur les élections.
So her strategy was to kick out the most vocal fascists from her party and to focus on elections.
Et beaucoup en ont déduit que ce parti, du coup, changeait de nature.
And so many people deducted from that this party's nature had radically changed.
Le problème est que toute l'histoire du fascisme a démontré la capacité de ces mouvements à évoluer en fonction de leur histoire et du changement de la situation politique.
Except that the history of fascist movements has demonstrated that they have always sought to transform themselves and transform their image according to the various shifts in the political field.
Le révolutionnaire italien Gramsci a par exemple parlé de deux fascismes en tension pour parler du parti de Mussolini, entre des groupes violents dans les campagnes et une stratégie électorale et de recherche d'alliance avec les conservateurs au niveau institutionnel.
So, for instance, Antonio Gramsci spoke, when he was speaking of Mussolini's party, obviously, and he spoke of two fascisms. One that was openly violent in the rural areas, and one that sought to give itself a more institutional image by reaching agreements with the most conservative mainstream forces in parliament, for instance.
Et c'est exactement les tensions qui se développent à l'heure actuelle au Front National. Beaucoup de commentateurs politiques parlent d'une crise à partir de sa défaite. C'est en réalité à partir des victoires que le Front National a réussi à engranger qu'aujourd'hui, il y a ce débat-là qui se pose de façon ouverte.
And there are similar tensions inside of the Front National today. Commentators say that those tensions are a result of her latest electoral defeat, but I would argue that those tensions are actually inherent in the sustained growth and the sustained victories that the FN has been able to achieve.
D'un côté, plus de 50% des policiers en France votent pour le Front National. L'état d'urgence a été prolongé une 6e fois, qui permet de fermer des mosquées, d'interdire des manifestations. Dans ces conditions-là, une partie du Front National pense que l'heure est venue de conquérir le pouvoir.
So, but in reality, for instance, over 50% of police officers are Front National voters. There's a very strong authoritarian tendency within the French state. The state of emergency has just been prolonged for the 6th time, and it allows all sorts of repression against Muslims, etc., etc. And in this context, there are many people in the FN who think that their hour for power has come.
De l'autre, il y a ceux qui continuent à argumenter sur la nécessité de construire un mouvement de masse autour de leur projet politique et qui cherchent des alliances aussi bien avec des groupes qui ont empêché les lycéens de manifester dans l'entre-deux tours que ceux qui aujourd'hui organisent des campagnes pour empêcher de sauver les migrants en Méditerranée.
And on the other hand, there are people who want to transform the party into a mass party and look for alliances with smaller, very radical fighting groups that, for instance, try to prevent the high school students from demonstrating or are trying to organize boats to prevent saving migrants in the Mediterranean.
Et en réalité, Marine Le Pen a mené une très bonne campagne de leur point de vue qui a su combiner les deux aspects, à la fois en cherchant des alliances du côté d'une partie de la bourgeoisie et de la droite, et de l'autre en faisant des déclarations d'hommage à Pétain ou en nommant son vice-président qui nie les chambres à gaz.
So Marine Le Pen was able to really play on both sides of this campaign. On the one hand, she pursued the detoxification strategy. She tried to find alliances to her left. You know, it's all relative. And on the other hand, she was really flattering the fascist core of her party by constant references to Pétain, to the repression of Jews during World War II in France. And she, when she temporarily stepped down from the FN's presidency, she named a very well-known Holocaust denier in her place.
Ok, et pour conclure, je dois conclure. Simplement, il est extrêmement important aujourd'hui en France qu'on reconstruise cette tradition antifasciste qui consistait à dire qu'il ne fallait pas laisser de démocratie aux ennemis de la démocratie. On peut le faire autour de 3 axes.
Oui, vas-y.
Ah, pardon. Le premier, c'est de s'adresser à tous ceux qui pensent encore que ce parti est dangereux, et c'est aujourd'hui une majorité des gens en France. Le deuxième, c'est d'empêcher le développement de ce parti autour de ce qui fait son corps au niveau électoral, c'est en menant des campagnes antiracistes. Et le troisième, c'est en nommant ce parti pour ce qu'il est, à savoir un parti fasciste.
And therefore, to conclude, I think that we need to revive the anti-fascist tradition in France, which consists basically in saying that we cannot leave any democratic space to the enemies of democracy. And we should advance really on 3 axes. The first one is to address ourselves, first of all, to the majority of the French population who nevertheless still believe that this is a toxic and dangerous party. The second bit is to try to attack the party and prevent its strategy of detoxification and its mass electoral strategy by mounting massive anti-racist campaigns. And the third one is to try to really attack it on the ground, do a cordon sanitaire, and isolate its fascist core from the rest of the party. Thank you.
Sorry, it's a very tight panel. I'd just like to introduce Christine Buchholz, who will be our next speaker. She's the MP for Die Linke and is a supporter of Marx 21. Thank you.
Okay, comrades, long time in Germany there was not the same development like in many other countries. So over the last years we didn't have the development of a far-right or right populist party like the Front National or the FPÖ in Austria. But this changed when 2013 the AfD was founded. AfD stands for Alternative für Deutschland, Alternative for Germany. And first of all, this party was mainly focused on fighting the euro, but after the Pegida movement in many cities of Germany, and after the racist response to the mass immigration to Germany, the AfD turned more and more to be an openly racist and Islamophobic party, which it was before, but this was not the main focus of it in the very first years. It rose over the last years to 15% in the polls, and as we have 16 federal states, it was able to get into the parliaments of 14 of the 16 states. Now we have a situation where the AfD is preparing for enter the German Bundestag, and luckily enough, they are at the moment shrinking. So at the moment they are with 7%, but this is not really giving us. It's not. It's still an alarming situation, and we are still campaigning very much to keep it out of the Bundestag. It's important to know that the AfD is in more and more places of Germany. It's getting the organized center of the radical right. And we have seen over the last years an increase in racist violence and Islamophobic violence all over the country. So in order to fight this development and to fight the AfD, we have to understand what kind of party it is. And so, as I said, it is a racist, a nationalistic party. It is homophobic, it is sexist. And I think it's very important to understand that the racism against Muslims is the core of it. In the election program for the general election, there's a chapter only about Islam and why Islam is not doesn't fit like to the German way of living and thinking. At the moment, the AfD is not a fascist party, but I would say it's something like a semi-fascist party. So we have different wings within. We have market fundamentalistic neocons. We have a nationalist right wing. We have open neo-fascist forces. these different forces are united by the belief that the AfD at this very historic moment gives them the opportunity to break out of the isolation, out of the niche to which the radical right was confined over the last 50 years. And there are two different tactics the different parts of the AfD are having. First is represented by the party leader, Frauke Petry. She wants to change the politics through parliament and shifting the balance of forces to the right. And so for her, it is very important to denounce tactically the open advances of parts of the party to the neo-fascist right, at the one hand side, and also the tactical denouncing of anti-Semitism, for example. There are different cases of people, open anti-Semitic or open fascist forces. They were criticized, and she tried to expel them from the party, but no one of these people were expelled so far. But you have to understand that this is the one wing of the party. They are not anti-racist, but they have a tactical position on the fascist past and also on a question like on anti-Semitism. The second big wing is the neo-fascist wing. So they show. So they sometimes they show their face quite open, even though they know that it's quite suicidal to be too open fascist. But they have to also to speak to the fascist right movements outside the AfD, whose support they want to gain. For them, the parliament is one element, but not the central. And Björn Höcke, the chief of the AfD in Thuringia, he is the core person of this wing, but he's protected also by many other central figures. He was the first to mobilize in the streets of Erfurt and to show that this is an important part of gaining the power. And he said that the AfD is the last peaceful chance of our fatherland. This is how he put it. And in the beginning of this year, he had held a speech in Dresden where he said the Holocaust memorial is a memorial of shame, which led to a huge protest in society and also to conflict within the AfD itself, because it's still political suicide if you openly put yourself in the tradition of the Nazis. So he is openly talking about, or he's looking for the open cooperation with the Pegida movement. He's putting forward the cooperation with the identitarian movement. I think you don't have it in Britain, but it's in France, the Bloc Identitaire, and it's also growing in Germany. And so Frauke Petry, so the leader of the party, who was more of this other wing, the first wing, the parliamentarian wing, tried to kick him out, but without success. The fascist wing was in the beginning of this year on the rise, and they had a big victory in Cologne in April when Frauke Petry tried to have a tactical denouncement of racism and anti-Semitism on this conference, but the fascist right pushed the conference, and she had to retreat and had to take back her amendment. And so this was the situation in April, where we also had a big demonstration, 50,000 in the city of Cologne, protesting the AfD. And I think it's very important to see that the contradiction between these two wings is brought forward by the massive protest of people in many cities. So we saw over the last weeks and months where the AfD had stalls on the streets or tried to get a room for meetings. There were big protests. And they, after the election in Schleswig-Holstein, which is one federal country, they complained that they couldn't go on the streets with having campaigns in the street because people were coming and protest, and they couldn't have their stalls. And I think this is very important to understand that this brought a crisis which brought them now to 7% in the polls. But the so-called moderate wing is at the moment on the rise again because, of course, they are afraid of losing the election, of not getting into the parliament. And, of course, they all know that this is very important for them to keep on and to succeed as a movement in building this force, even if they have different political tactics. So I think it's important that we keep the pressure and organize against the AfD wherever it's on the street, and that we use this contradiction between those two different options, the parliamentary and the radical right fascist wing, and to use this contradiction to make their life difficult. So we were part of building a campaign which is called Aufstehen gegen Rassismus, which means stand up to racism, which openly sets the AfD in a connection to fascism. So this is a picture of Björn Höcke, the fascist guy from Thuringia, and it says, never again, nie wieder, like reference to the German fascism. And at the same time, we try to focus on Islamophobia as a mean kind of racism of which they try to use to reach out to the center of society, to the middle society. So this means no to the hatred against Muslims. And so this campaign is quite successful in many places to organize against the stalls. But other people are doing the same thing. And so this gives us the perspective of really fighting the AfD, keeping it out of the Bundestag, and at the same time to make a big step forward against fighting anti-Muslim racism. So this is what we are doing in Die Linke as well. So the Die Linke, the left party, is a party which is mainly organized around social demands and anti-war position. But over the last years, and the rise of the AfD gave us the need to fight against racism and to bring forward anti-racist position in the left party as well. So I'm very proud that we managed to have a clear position on Islamophobia and also against the ban of the hijab in our party program for the common election, which is very important, so that the whole party is now on this position of fighting Islamophobia. And so I think this is very important. We have the chance to keep out the AfD out of the German Bundestag in September. This is a huge task. It's not automatic. It will be a huge task. And I'm not sure if we are managing to be successful, but I think it's very important that a left wing that wants to pose a left and socialist alternative has to be very clear that a left alternative can only be brought up in the society if there's a clear position on anti-racism and if we collectively fight the right and fight the fascists, and this is what we are doing in Germany.
Weyman Bennett, the Joint Secretary of Stand Up to Racism and UAF, anti-racist and anti-fascist organisations, and a leading member of the SWP.
I want to start off by thanking all our comrades who've spoken out about the rise of fascism and I call racist populist parties. Because critically, across Europe, what we're seeing is a polarisation. The majority of the polarisation is towards the left. We've seen it in this country with Jeremy Corbyn, we've seen it with Syriza, we've seen it with the rise of the left party, we've seen it in France, and some, I know he's confused, he thinks he's the king of Versailles, but nevertheless, there's a push against what's going on. And we have to start with that as the point of which resistance takes place. It's fantastically important. I'm proud of the Austrian comrades, actually. when Hoffa stood up and said there was no opposition against him, when you saw the leaflet come out, fuck Hoffa, forgive my language, but, you know, and he put it up and said, how dare them, it's because you're a Nazi, because you wear the corn blue flower and you represent the Nazi tradition, and it's important. The real question is why we're not fatalists is because you can break these people. But we have to understand how they're working. They're working in 4 ways. Open Nazis like Golden Dawn. We've got Euro-fascists who hide, or like the French National Front. It's a disgrace that Marine Le Pen was put on Women's Hour inside this country. I'm proud we demonstrated outside the BBC when they put Le Pen on unadulterated. We have to label these people for what they are as fascists and Nazis, because if we don't label them, then actually what they do is begin to grow. And actually there's a weird thing happening. The fascist and the Euro-fascist and the racist populists are cross-pollinating between each other. They've formed some kind of weird fascist international. And the reason why I say that's important is because the demonstrations we had on the march, in March and in the 19th inside France, represent a group, every one of these countries had opposition against them. It's important that we start identifying when they use Islamophobia, when they attack refugees, about the question about how you build a united front resistance. No matter the size of the organisation, it matters that socialists are at the heart of it. I also think it's important when you look at people like Marine Le Pen that she's using other ideas as well as Islamophobia. They're using ideas of Euroscepticism, they're using ideas of family-friendly type of organisations around the Catholic organisations. We're seeing them use different types, and the way that they're morphing. Fidesz inside Hungary. I think what's happening inside Hungary represents a growth of other organisations, fascist organisations. The way they treat the Muslims on the border represents the way that they're organising across Europe in this way, and they're networking. And that's the reason why it's important for us to network. After all, we are generally friendly people, as opposed to Nazis that want to rebuild the death camps. But I say that because I think one of the impacts of Trump and the alternative right is to try and give these people a bigger platform. And part of the reason why we're talking about building resistance all over Europe, around these demonstrations, around centering about defence of refugees, is a question you can begin to break them. After all, Marine Le Pen's father, the poster boy for that was the BNP, was Nick Griffin. And actually, we buried Nick Griffin. It was a difficult job because they used the electoral thing and hid who they were as a Nazis. But you still could see that. But I still think that if you look in this country, you've still got open Nazis, Britain First, and other organisations in the bill. But you've also got the street movements. I don't know if I was glad to be twinned with Germany over the Pegida movement. The patriotic people that were against what's taking place. There's a demonstration in Germany, and there was a demonstration in this country against Pegida when they were in Newcastle and when they were in different places. This kind of international cooperation is going to be very important in terms of the Nazis trying to get a level of respectability that they haven't had. Britain First tried to get Polish Nazis to come over and join them in the demonstration that was taking place. It's very important. The demonstration of the anti-fascists that took place there shows the potential for beginning to resist them. The one other quick thing I was going to add was that because of the collapse of Stalinism in Eastern Europe, what you're seeing as well is a third way type of Nazis that are talking about alternative ideas to neither capitalism or communism, and they begin to fill a vacuum there. I'm not arguing that the Nazis can't be defeated. What I'm arguing is that we have to develop an analysis of who they are and what they are. We have to distinguish between people that are Euro-Nazis, people that are another element is the street armies. And we're seeing in this country, we're seeing people called the Football Alliance lads, who at the heart of them are Islamophobic. In other words, you're also seeing street armies start to develop. But these people can be dismantled as well, in the same way as we dismantled the English Defence League. I think part of making sure there's a beacon of the left that gives an alternative to what happens also is a question of raising the alternative to the fascists. It's brilliant that Jeremy Corbyn joins us on Stand Up to Racism, joins us when there's an attack on a mosque. I think it's important that we have a united front with the Labour Party, with the left. We also have to raise another key question. Is in all the countries where they're using austerity and neoliberalism, it's the question about what comes afterwards. What comes if these people don't achieve or attempt to break through. I know Petros is going to talk about what's happening in Golden Dawn, so I'm not going to talk about that. But what I think is part of what the left faces is also building an alternative, a left alternative, at the same time as fighting off the Nazis and the racist populists and diagnosing each group as they grow and exposing them, and also having an ideological explanation about who they are and how you stop them. If you do that, you can have Nick Griffin crying and barking, and you can have Tommy Robinson, as we kicked him off our demonstration because he had no mates, because we'd broken the backbone of his organisation. But we're going to have to do this in Berlin, in Athens, in France. And I think one of the biggest dangers is taking place inside France. But I think the work that started there now gives us hope, and the anger against them gives us hope that these people can be broken. I've only got 5 minutes and that is it, so I'm stopping.
So our final speaker is Petros Constantinou. So I get your name right, Petros, sorry. Petros Constantinou, who's coordinator of CAFA, an anti-racist, anti-fascist organisation in Greece, and he's also a councillor of the municipality of Athens. Thank you.
Okay. I think that it is very important to have the picture of what happened in Europe in the last year, because the media, they were making stories proclaiming that in Europe the far right is powerful. They are powerful because of Brexit, because there are populist currents against the European Union, and so on. In reality, we could see a growth of the vote for the fascist and the far right parties, but there is also another dimension of this, that they didn't achieve their goals, and country by country they are in crisis. I mean, look what happened with UKIP in these elections. And even with Marine Le Pen in France, of course it is in danger when you have 10 million votes. But on the other hand, you have a crisis that all these things, they give the possibility for the movement to fight back. And also the same picture with Austria. They had the rerun for the presidential election, and the result was worse than the previous one. And this was very clear. That it was marked by the intervention of the anti-fascist. The sister organization of SWP was very crucial in this fight, and this gave us the example that even small organizations that they are organizing anti-fascist campaigns, they can have big results, and we have to keep this in mind when we're discussing how to build and fight against the racism and fascism. When you come to Greece and Syriza is a left government. Now it's in the second year. And, of course, as we see that they are capitulating to austerity and all these measures for privatization and so on the same point, a lot of people would expect that, okay, it's very difficult to do something against austerity because this opens the fight against the bankers, the big forces in the European Union. But come on, we can do something on the political fronts. And anti-racism and anti-fascism, it is an option. And this really didn't happen. Syriza signed the agreement between the European Union and Turkey, closing the border and opening detention centers around Greece and creating ghettos outside the city. They didn't want the refugees to stay inside the cities. And also they signed a second agreement with the European Union, the Malta Agreement, which really closed the borders all around the Mediterranean Sea, opening the way for thousands of refugees to be drowned, making the Mediterranean Sea really into a mass grave. And this happened with their own signature. On the same time, the Greek state had the picture that all the police force was really on the part of the Nazis. More than 50% in the elections, the officers and the policemen, they voted for the Nazis. So people would expect that they will do something related to the trial of Golden Dawn. But really, on these two fronts, only the movement, the workers' movement and the anti-fascist and the anti-racist movement make really the difference by opening all these big fights. And it is very important, this fight, because there is the only way for the workers' movement and for the left to build the alternative is to stop the right wing and especially to stop the fascists who are trying again, after 2 years when they are in trial, to come back, to bring again their presence in the street, to fight against the refugees. They try to stop the refugee children going to the schools. They open the fight against the refugees of welcoming them in the cities by waving the flag of Islamophobia and so on. And recently, they opened a wave of new racist attacks. But the reality is that the resistance of the workers' movement in Greece goes hand in hand by the resistance to racism. And I will give 3 examples. The first example is what happened in the last month in Greece, where we have, on the same period, on the same time, two attacks. One was by a boss in a plastic factory just outside Athens, 40 kilometers, and the other was racist attacks in another city, both of them in industrial areas. So when one worker was sacked and he went to the factory to take just the paper, his paper, he was brutally attacked, physically attacked by the boss. This factory is the immense majority of the workers were Pakistani migrant workers. But they went immediately on strike. They formed a factory committee. They communicated with the Pakistani community in Kerfa. And we organized solidarity with them. We brought solidarity from people who are locals, and they were connected with the local refugee camp. And these people, they came in solidarity with the migrant workers fighting the boss there. It was amazing. This solidarity led the trade unions, the whole of the left, the Communist Party, and the trade union leadership to support the strike. And after 19 days of struggle, the boss was really humiliated. He surrendered, and he was forced not to sack any of the workers and to change the working conditions inside the factory. And the other example is that in the other city, the fascists were organizing. There is not much time, don't worry. Don't cheat on my time. So in the city of Asprobrigos, they organized more than 50 physical attacks, one fascist group. They had support of the local police, of the local mayor. But we organized 2 demonstrations. One demonstration, there was a lot of fight in this demonstration. We marched in their area. The police was supporting them. We had 10 injured by the police, not by the fascists, and this was a victorious demonstration in that area. Practically it stopped the physical attacks. The fascists, they retreated. So when 1 month later we organized a big anti-fascist demo to condemn the police that were supporting the fascists, what happened really is that the support stopped covering them, and this opened the space that 7 of them, they ended in prison. They were members of Golden Dawn. They were not just some fascists that nobody could identify. But the real thing is that the police was forced by the movement to abandon the relation with the Nazis. The chief of the police in that area was one of the 10 chief of the police that was displaced when Pavlos Fyssas was murdered. And now in his position again. That's the problem that the left government is not dealing with them. And I will come to the trial of Golden Dawn, which is very important that now we have this party that from 2013, after the murder of Pavlos Fyssas, they ended, the whole of the parliamentary group, in the first period they ended in prison. Now the trial started in 2015, and it's going for 2 years. The trial meant that they were forced to stop the open physical attacks our storm troops. It was a barrier to them. In the polls, they never rose. They lost 2 MPs in this parliament that they are going on. They had some splits, but the real thing is that they became to be isolated. They became to be targeted not only by the KRFA and the leftists as Nazis, and even we had the prime minister the last week asking the leader of the neoliberal party, what is your opinion about the Golden Dawn? Because 1 week ago, Mitsotakis, the leader of the neoliberal party, they said that in Greece there is only left violence, and the Golden Dawn does not exist. This is what he said. In 1 week, he was forced to say in the parliament that, okay, they are Nazis and there are some criminal elements in this party. So this is very, very clear that the anti-fascist movement, with all the action on the street, can have results. And I think that we are in the position that internationally and all around Europe, we can build the alternative to horror and give hope the chance to prevail. Why? We have a strong workers' movement that is left resisting and left which is very clear that we have to fight against the Nazis and not to ignore them, not to underestimate them or panic when they are rising, and to identify that with a common struggle, with a united front, with unity with other left parties and left activists, we can really beat them. And what happened in the 18th of March last year was really the emergence of a new European movement. In Europe, there is the movement with solidarity with the refugees. There is a resistance to austerity, and there is also anti-fascist movement. And we are very proud now that we have in Germany, in Austria, in France, in all other countries, coalitions and movements that are fighting against fascism. We want to invite everybody on 14 and 15 of October. Yes, I believe that also in France there is resistance, because I can see you there. And we have to organize better. So we'll invite everybody on 14 and 15 to join us in the International Conference of KRFA, to join forces and to have a common plan, because we can beat them. We're more powerful than them. We stand on the workers' movement and on the anti-capitalist left to do it.
Hi, my name is Gael, and my organization is the NPA, French Anti-Capitalist Party. How fight fascism in France is really a central question. We are confronted in many difficulties. The main part of left is Islamophobe and so unable to lead campaign against racism, like said Vanina. Secondly, dominant media and large parts of unions are explaining that it's a populism party, National Front, and not a fascism party. In this context, in my opinion, the new hope comes from the thousands activists who radicalized against capitalist systems since many movements in France. This last year's movement against neoliberalism law, or ecological law, or anti-racism project. By example, last year, identitary bloc near from the English Defence League was marched by high school students since a big movement. Another example, after the expulsion of Calais Jingle in January, National Front tried to organize many demonstrations in many small cities to say no migrants in our village, in our city, and they were always minority against the people said refugees welcome and Nazi go out. So I think it's possibilities to convince all these people, the young people who fight capitalism, people who are very against police, people who try to organize movements for refugees, to build a French united front against fascism. I think it's the only possibilities today.
Thank you. This one will be followed by you next. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry, it's about France as well. Now, I wanted to give first a good news, secondly, bad news. Good news are that there is, and that's the good news, again, direct anti-fascist action in France. And it happened during the election. Every National Front and Marine Le Pen meetings was confronted with the demonstrations. They were not mass demonstrations, but it was led by young activists, thousands, 3,000 in Nantes, 5,000 in Bordeaux, there was in Paris as well, and so on. In Nantes, for example, and that's a good example of the connection you've made between the fight, the labor law activist, the activist again, this project of airport in Nantes, and the fight in solidarity with migrants. They have organized some things, and the fight against National Front. They not only organized a demonstration, but they succeed in blocking the buses, the coaches coming from the highway, making a lot of pains. And it was very interesting. They wrote a slogan to invite people, on the fascist coaches to come to the anti-racist demonstration on the 19th of March. That's the good news, because it means that there is a possibility and the opportunity to rebuild an anti-fascist tradition confronting directly the Nazis in France. The bad news is that what is called here in England, what we call dédiabolisation of the National Front, detoxification. Detoxification is not coming from the National Front becoming less and less fascist. Detoxification is coming from the mainstream parties in France who, by Islamophobia, racist policy against migrants and so on, against Romas and so on, and especially and disgracefully the left and even the radical left who legitimized Islamophobia, who legitimized racism and so on. That's where detoxification came from. And so it means that now these ideas are more legitimate. So for the fascists, it's very easy to be Islamophobic, to be racist and so on. And that's a lesson. And that's a lesson for now. Because it means that, yes, it exists some opportunities to connect the big rivals in France at the moment to a strategy to fight directly against racism and against fascism. And that's why what Vanina explained is so important. It means action, it means mobilization, but in his argument as well. And that's what we have to do.
Yeah, I'm David from Barcelona, an activist in the United Against Fascism and Racism in Barcelona. Catalonia is an example that even with a very small sister organisation of the SWP, it's possible to build a very big and successful anti-fascist movement. In 2010, the Euro-fascists, they were growing. They almost got into the Catalan parliament. A few months later, they got 67 councillors across Catalonia. We fought for and built a united anti-fascist movement. We've now got all the left parties, from the Socialist Party, which is not very radical, through to the radical left, all the unions, neighbours' organisations, and more Muslim organisations very actively involved. One of our spokespeople is a very active hijabbed Muslim activist, a feminist woman. And that wasn't easy. A lot of the arguments are very difficult. For example, that we need unity, including the Socialist Party, where we disagree on many things. And we have to fight for that against sectarianism. We also have to fight that we have more moderate people. We said we do need to organise against the fascists, not with boots and masked up, but we need to get lots of people on the street, and we have to fight for that. We have to fight against Islamophobia. We had lots of arguments inside United Against Fascism to win people to the idea that we defend women's rights even if they're Muslims. We defend mosques even if we're secular. And we produced tens of thousands of these leaflets, and they are being handed out across Catalonia. Stop Islamophobia, and also another one, tens of thousands of refugees welcome, putting those arguments. So we have to fight against sectarianism, we have to fight against Islamophobia, and that is why we also need to have the groups in the tendency represented by the SWP and Petros and Christine and so on, and Vanina. Because a lot of the left doesn't understand that you can have a broad movement, including reformists, and defend your own politics. Either you hide your politics or you're sectarian. No, they don't understand that we need to be on the side of Muslim people and the Muslim community against the Islamophobics. There's other, no, I'm secular, I won't support them. Yesterday there was a protest in one town outside Barcelona against a Nazi group that's trying to have a campaign against the mosque. Our people there were very successful. It's a new group, I don't even know most of them, but they were there with a banner, Stop Islamophobia, Unite Against Fascism. Today, as we speak, there's another protest in another parts of Barcelona against a fascist group that had an aggression a few weeks ago. So it's possible to build, but in order to build, it's not easy building united movements. We need to be really hard, really sharp, and that also means revolutionary Marxist politics.
As Weyman said, it makes you very proud to be part of an international group, and as David Cavall has just said, with people on the platform and the other comrades here from internationally, when you hear exactly what people are doing, it's very proud indeed. I think one of the things perhaps that's going on with some of the fascists is that some of the fascists internationally, places like Hungary and Bulgaria, is a radicalisation going on amongst fascist groups. For instance, Jobbik. Jobbik's just had a split. A lot of people know Jobbik, the Iron Guard paramilitary group, parliamentary representation, and so on and so on. Jobbik have just had a split. Good. What's the split? It's not to the left, surprise, it's to the right. There's people who are fed up with Jobbik's, a number of their policy being co-opted effectively by the extreme right-wing government there, not fascist government in Hungary, but extremely right-wing towards refugees and so on and so on and so on, and workers and so on. And there's been a split away by open Nazis. The next step will be terrorism, if they're not doing it already. There's no two ways about this. Weyman and people mentioned Nick Griffin. Nick Griffin and Jim Dowson, the people who are well behind the BNP recently, have been so done over by anti-fascists, they've had to go to Bulgaria, who are now mixing it with paramilitaries over there. So I think there's lots of, not interesting things going on, but there's lots of splits in their own forces to a degree when they don't quite see, or their policies are some of their views and policies are co-opted by right-wing governments. The other side of it, if there's any comrades from Poland, I hope they put their hands up, because the Polish people, a lot of people will know the Polish situation on the one hand is desperately frightening in terms of the fascist marches over there and so on. But one thing inspired me, and earlier on March 18th, Petros mentioned the international marches, March the 18th this year, it was a small but very significant and quite brave, frankly, anti-fascist mobilisation in Warsaw. Now that took a lot of guts to do, I have to be honest, but they did it, and they're clearly pulling around them comrades and other people, forces to our right, clearly pulling people around them to organise in the best tradition of a Trotsky United Front and so on. Quick thing on the Football Lads Association, Football Lads Alliance Football Lads Alliance. One of the things it's going to be difficult. You know, these things aren't easy. It's going to be difficult, some of this stuff, I think. But a couple of people come up today, and already people are really organising very, very quickly. There's a couple of people come up, I won't name the clubs, two northern clubs. They've, in the spirit of the Corbyn age, so to speak, they've approached their MPs, or in one case are approached their MP tomorrow. Two people who support Corbyn to say, come down with us, first home game of the season. We want to get a mob of people, fans, to drive it home. These people are beyond the pale. And in that sense, again, in the United Front tradition, whatever else, you know, football fans like anyone else will disagree over all sorts. Whatever else they may disagree on, in Britain, in that essence, we can start to drive a wedge into the likes of the Football Lads Alliance.
Just before you start, the speaker here will be followed by Michael in the corner there, and that will be our last speaker in this session, as I need to call the panel back before the final rally. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm a comrade from Austria, basically, and I wanted to talk a bit about the situation there. We'll have national votes now in October, early cold, and basically the FPÖ has the potential of getting this around the same percent as the Social Democrats and the conservative parties, and getting like maybe even the biggest pitch in this vote. and that's the party Hofer came from, so we can all see where they are standing. They are basically deal with the communism. And in that struggle, we have this social democratic opening up to go into coalition with these FPÖ, at least still talking about that, starting to, going and that. And at the same time, they introduced more laws to criminalize demonstrations, or like to make it harder for demonstrations in different parts. But there is a movement against it from the social youth, from the youth group with us. There is the Refugees Welcomes movement, which will have a demonstration in October, week before the elections, basically. And we have some hope with the Hofer voters, and not Hofer voters, the ones that voted against Hofer, basically for the other candidate, mainly voted against him to not get him into parliament. So that's a good thing.
This will be our last contributor in this discussion. My apologies.
So really quickly, I mean, the first thing I wanted to agree with what the French comrade said at the beginning. It's not natural that anti-racism and opposition to Islamophobia flows naturally out of an anti-austerity movement. People have got to put a political argument into it. If you think about what's going on at the minute, for example, in London, around Grenfell, one of the big arguments around housing in London traditionally has been the whole thing about migrants taking over housing stocks and the rest of it. Actually, one of the things we've got to try and put in the argument is when the government talks about only extending to 1 year, the idea of those undocumented workers who are living in Grenfell to stay, we have to be at the centre of putting up an argument which is they have the right to stay. We have to put these arguments consistently and clearly, because there are people on the left, obviously in other countries, but in this country as well, who think that simply putting anti-austerity arguments is enough. They think in lots of ways that putting anti-racist arguments is in some way divisive if you put this up, and it just isn't true, and we've got to try and win a political argument and stuff with loads of people. The second thing from what the people on the platform were saying as well is clear, that there's a whole slippage between the right-wing populist groups who use racism and Islamophobia, the Nazis, right, stuff, how these groups align themselves together and stuff, and what their political development is. And it's really important as a tendency and stuff that we're attempting to analyse the growth of this. I mean, lots of people at the event over the last couple of days have been talking about the stuff around the Football Lads Alliance. So they've been talking about that because we've gone through an experience where most meetings over the last few weeks and months, we would have been talking about the fact that the British Nazis, the EDL, the Britain First and the rest of it are very marginalised, etc., etc. Suddenly you get a formation exploding onto the streets with thousands of people. It's not a Nazi formation, but we know that the Nazis are trying to fish within that formation stuff over it, and are very happy that it's developing. People like Tommy Robinson trying to get in and the rest of it and stuff about it. And unless we can analyse that, unless we analyse it correctly, it also means that we can use the wrong tactics in the situation. And we know that actually one of the things in this country that's going on is the Nazis are quite clearly trying to reorganise themselves around the idea of Islamophobia. The demonstration a few weeks ago up in Manchester, around 2,000 people around Tommy Robinson, was under the basis and stuff of fighting hate and fighting extremism, right? It's a favourite. They end up using some of the slogans that the left use in Britain now and stuff in order to get support. The last thing is about establishing trying to fight and establish a tradition of anti-racism. The comrade spoke about the conference that's going to be happening in Greece on the 14th of October. On the 21st of October, there'll be the same kind of event being held in London. When we talk talk about the events around UN Anti-Racism Day, what we're trying to do is establish inside the working class movement a tradition of open anti-racist protests. The protest in London, this time around, was 30 to 40,000 people. It's been growing, it's been more established, it's been brought in bigger sections of the trade union movement behind it, because there are sections of the trade union movement who normally we're having massive rows with, right, stuff over about industrial strategy and the rest of it, who realise there's a systematic attempt to divide British workers on the lines of Islamophobia, on immigration, or migrant workers and the rest of it. So we're trying to do something special inside the movement internationally. We're trying to uphold a tradition about what anti-racism and anti-fascism looks like, and we're trying to re-establish that tradition in country after country.
And I'll now hand back to Yanni. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Ok, 3 choses. Du coup, la première, peut-être l'intérêt de ce type de discussion, c'est de nous conforter dans l'idée qu'à travers l'Europe, les conditions sont les mêmes en termes de crise économique, de problèmes politiques, mais ça ne signifie absolument pas qu'il est impossible de construire des mouvements antifascistes de masse.
Okay, so three things really. The first thing is that such discussions and debates really establish the reality that there are similar conditions happening throughout Europe, from the economic crisis, obviously, and various political issues. But this doesn't mean at all that there is nothing to be done.
Et s'il y a actuellement un réel danger fasciste, c'est vrai qu'en France, on en voit la manifestation très concrète à travers le Front National. On a affaire à 2 débats très importants en France sur qui vote Front National et pourquoi les gens votent Front National.
Yeah, so if there is a fascist danger in Europe, in France it seems to be the most obvious, and we are facing 2 very crucial debates, which is who is voting Front National, first of all, and why are they voting Front National?
Depuis maintenant plus de 20 ans, il y a cette idée répandue que c'est la classe ouvrière qui vote Front National massivement. Or, cette idée-là, il faut absolument la rejeter et convaincre les gens que c'est faux. La majorité de la classe ouvrière aujourd'hui continue à s'abstenir ou à voter contre le Front National pour d'autres partis qui incarnent davantage l'espoir de la lutte contre l'austérité.
Yeah, so for 20 years we've been hearing that it is the traditional white working class that is voting for Front National, and it's very important to establish the facts. This is absolutely not true. In reality, the majority of the working class simply does not vote. They do not turn up. And there is also a very significant section that votes for other parties other than Front National. So on the whole, the vast majority of the working class is not voting Front National.
Mais la contrepartie, c'est d'être absolument clair aussi que quand les classes populaires votent pour le Front National, ce n'est absolument pas lié à leurs conditions sociales. Quand ils votent Front National, ils font le choix d'un vote raciste et sécuritaire.
At the same time, we have to be very clear that when popular classes, the poor or certain sections of the working class vote for Front National, it is not because of simply because of a social condition or reducible to economic condition. It is because they have made the choice of a racist and authoritarian vote.
Et c'est l'autre intérêt de cette coordination au niveau européen, c'est qu'effectivement en France, ça a été extrêmement important pour nous, cette date européenne de manifestation antiraciste et antifasciste le 19 mars.
And this is why European-wide coordination is very important. For us in France, the 19 March date, I think it was 18 of March in the rest of Europe, date was extremely important for us.
Elle intervenait dans la campagne présidentielle et on a argumenté sur le fait que justement la meilleure opposition au Front National et au débat tel qu'il se posait au niveau des médias, c'était d'être massivement présent dans la rue, aux côtés des migrants, aux côtés des victimes de violences policières et contre l'islamophobie.
And our reply really was that in order to face the Front National, the most important, the most vital thing was to get organized and to have a massive presence on the streets during the election campaign in order to really counter the terms of the debate, of the political debate that were imposed from above by the media through our own organization, our mobilization in favor of migrants and refugees, in favor of the victims of police violence and against Islamophobia.
Et malgré l'implication de la grande majorité de la gauche, depuis plusieurs années, c'est la plus grande manifestation antiraciste qu'on a vue à Paris, avec 15 000 personnes qui étaient dans la rue ce jour-là.
And in reality, it's probably the biggest anti-racist demonstration that we have seen in France for years, with 15,000 people in the streets of Paris on that day.
Donc bien sûr, c'est ça qu'il faut qu'on continue à construire.
And obviously, this is what we have to continue and to build and organize.
Well, I also want to make 3 points. I think from all the contributions, it's very important to say we have to be clear about the character of the right-wing formations we are facing in our countries, because what we are doing practically against it depends on this analysis. And we were fighting for the analysis that there is a threat of fascism through the AfD, and we were absolutely isolated at first because people were saying, well, this is not true, they are racist, but there are no fascists in it. And now I think it's absolutely clear, since Höcke was talking about the Holocaust memorial as a memorial of shame. So it's the common position. The SPD candidate for Chancellor, Martin Schulz, said that the AfD is the NPD light. NPD was the so far most important fascist party in Germany, and so I think it's important to be clear and to fight for this analysis very strongly, because this gives us the opportunity also to meet the weak point of the AfD to fight against. The second, this maybe touches a bit the point the Austrian comrade made, is to argue for the united front. So we had an argument in the left party when the AfD came up and had their first big successes, that we can't build an alliances, for example, with the SPD, because the comrades in the left party said, well, the SPD is responsible for the conditions that brought up the AfD. And there's a double mistake. The first mistake is that the AfD is brought up by austerity. And this is just the half-truth. The AfD is brought up by racism, which is spread by the conservative, but also by social and democratic people, and that we have to this is the first mistake. And the second mistake is that we are able to fight only with a small anti-racist minority and a politically clear radical left minority the threat of fascism. And so it's important to be clear that we have a broad united front against the fascist threat. At the same time, to be very clear and principled on anti-racism, on the migrant policy, and to attack the SPD and the Social Democrats everywhere when they support to close down the frontiers of Europe and to let people die in the Mediterranean, and to be against any form of racist politics. At the same time, to look for these alliances. And then, this is my last point, to be very clear that we have to have a left alternative. I started off saying that in the first years, or in the last 10 years, we hadn't had something like the AfD in Germany. And there was different reasons. One was that from 2007 on, Die Linke was, in a way, it was the protest party, and everyone who was not confident what the big parties were doing had a chance to vote for Die Linke. So Die Linke is still there. It's still strong with 8 to 9%, and I think it's still an option for protest and for all the people who want to have another world. But it lost a bit the image of protest, and this is also an argument, or this is also a matter of fact, that people vote for protest for the AfD, and this means that we have to build a radical left, which is a real alternative to the austerity and to the racism we are having every day by the traditional political forces. And so it's very important that all revolutionaries and everyone who wants to create a real alternative has to fight for this also in these broader political movements. And I think these three things are part parcel of a successful, hopefully successful strategy to stop the fascists and to stop the radical right in Germany, but elsewhere in Europe.
I'm just going to be brief by saying that internationalism lies at the heart of Marxism. And when we look at, in this country, it's not an accident that Nigel Farage backed up Marine Le Pen in the demonstration. The man that held the hand of Donald Trump then used that respectability in order to build up what was going on inside France. And we have to start from the ability that we can stop these people. You see, the March of 18th, it happened in Norway, it happened in Sweden, it happened in the Netherlands, in terms of where Geert Wilders is building. We have to use our organisation, our strength, to help each other. When they marched in the Court de Calais, and the Front National came there, it was important that both the UK and the French organisations came together to say that refugees are welcome here, and pushed up against the National Front. And when we were asked here why she wasn't respectable, we said she's a fascist. Because we were able to, by that combination, it matters how big and how organised we are. Trotsky had 50 supporters in Germany at the time when the Nazis came to power. Actually, we've got a lot more people than that. And it matters that that number is much more people, but also we have to be politically clear about what we're up against. We can shape the opposition that's taken place now against the Nazis, and their street armies as well, if we move now. To be neither complacent, but neither be fearful. Spinoza said, don't cry, don't understand, but you also have to act as well. And I think if we act in a united way, we'll be able to push back the Nazis, but we'll also be able to build the political resistance that's taken place against them. I'll stop there.
Okay, 2 points. One is that United Front is not about making some agreements on paper and so on. It's about action. And in action, you need the unity of the working class. So if you go there, you will see that there are people who are, if we speak about Greece, it's Syriza, it's ex-members of the Social Democrats, it's splits from Syriza and so on. The action that can win is the action that is united. So I'll give a very brief example. The Nazis, they had 1 hour in the Greek public TV every month. Their leader was there. And the government of Syriza was denying to take any measure from their side. And they said, that's a decision by the Broadcasting Corporation. Then the administration of the corporation, they said it's a responsibility from the parliament. And the parliament said it's the responsibility of the authority that is controlling the media. So it was going around, and the solution was given by the trade union. The trade union has, of course, members of Syriza, and they are on the leadership there. Some, they left. They decided to organize a strike whenever the corporation, their boss, was planning to have this program. And that's how they stopped it. So it's very important to understand that United Front, it's about action, and if you want to win, you have to unite these people. The second thing is that worker resistance against austerity, it is not enough itself to stop the fascists and to stop racism. We have to open this discussion, we have to open this thing. Because in Greece, you know, we had 40 general strikes. This didn't mean that Gordon Dawn couldn't rise. So it is a necessity to have this independent fight against fascism and racism in order to not to leave the space, because there are part of even of the workers and other parts of society who are very angry, and they can be disorientated. So it's very important to be there. For us in Greece, when we had the workers' movement and we have the squares, right-wing groups, they try to be there. So it was very important to be there and say, no, we are also anti-racist and anti-fascist. And the last thing, really, I mean, the international dimension of what we are doing is really very important. I was in Athens on 18th of March, and we had a demonstration with thousands of refugees who joined this demo from the camps. And it was the workers, it was the refugees, the young people, it was all the parts of the left united. And the next day I was in Paris. And you could see there the power of a demonstration with thousands of young people hating the police terror, against racism. And I think that we can build this unity, and this unity in struggle can open the way of what kind of alternative. We can win thousands of activists and thousands of people who are in the left, and who are in the reformist left, for this anti-capitalist project if we are in the vanguard of organizing the struggle inside our countries and also internationally. We can do it.